The cord was fraying at the plug and the non-stick coating was scratched down to bare metal, but your mother still plugged that electric skillet in every weeknight without a second thought. By the time you washed your hands and sat down, a full dinner was already done. That skillet raised more children than most people realize. Number 21 on this list split every household in half because you either ate what was on that plate or you went to bed hungry. Number 14 turned the cheapest beef at the store into something that simmered for an hour and came out so tender you forgot what you paid for it. And number 5 came straight from a can that nobody wanted to admit was in the cabinet. The food industry spent decades trying to replace these dinners with frozen trays and microwave pouches. They never came close. Hit subscribe because this is the cooking that built families when time and money were both running out. Here are 25 forgotten electric skillet dinners every black mom made on busy nights. Number 25, fried egg sandwiches, 2 eggs cracked straight into the hot electric skillet, cooked until the white set and the yolk stayed soft enough to run when you bit down, laid on white bread with salt, pepper, and a smear of butter or a streak of hot sauce. Some mothers fried the eggs hard because that was how their household liked them. Others left the yolk loose so it soaked into the bread and turned the whole sandwich warm and rich. Eggs were always in the kitchen. A dozen cost next to nothing and sat in the refrigerator ready for the night when nothing else was thawed and nobody had the energy to stand over the stove for more than 5 minutes. 2 sandwiches per person, a glass of milk or juice, and the table was cleared before the evening news started. Number 24, pancake supper, flour, an egg, a splash of milk, a spoonful of sugar, and the electric skillet set to 350. Golden rounds poured one after another, flipped once, stacked on a plate, and covered with syrup or preserves. Breakfast for dinner was not a trend, it was a solution. On the nights when the meat was gone and the freezer had nothing left worth defrosting, pancakes filled the gap. Children never complained. A stack of pancakes with butter and syrup was a celebration. No matter what time of day it landed on the table. Some mothers added a few slices of fried spam or a side of scrambled eggs to stretch it further. The skillet held a steady temperature that kept every pancake the same shade of brown, which a stovetop burner never could. Number 23, skillet spaghetti, a pound of ground beef browned in the electric skillet with diced onion and garlic powder, a can of tomato sauce poured over it, then dry spaghetti noodles, broken in half so they would fit, laid right on top, enough water to cover the pasta, lid on heat at 300, and in about 15 minutes, the noodles absorbed everything and came out soft, red, and thick with meat sauce. No boiling a separate pot of water, no colander, no second burner needed. The spaghetti cooked in the sauce itself, which meant every strand carried the flavor of the beef and tomatoes through to the center. Some mothers stirred in a pinch of sugar to cut the acid. A few shook on garlic salt at the table. A box of spaghetti and a pound of ground beef stretched across 5 plates, and the whole thing cost less than ordering 1 pizza. On a school night when homework was due and the kitchen needed to be cleaned by 8, skillet spaghetti was the 20-minute dinner that solved everything at once. Number 22, sloppy joes. Ground beef browned in the skillet, then stirred together with ketchup, a little mustard, a spoonful of brown sugar, and diced onion. The mixture simmered until it thickened into a sweet, tangy sauce that piled onto hamburger buns without sliding off. No canned mix needed, though plenty of mothers used one and nobody judged them for it. Sloppy joes were the weeknight dinner that children actually asked for by name. The buns soaked through on the bottom, the sauce dripped down wrists, and napkins were mandatory. A pound of beef and a pack of buns fed 4 or 5 people, and the skillet cleaned up fast because the sauce never burned at low heat. Some mothers doubled the batch, and spoon the extra into a bowl for the next day's lunch. The electric skillet kept the temperature low enough that the sugar never scorched, which was the difference between a sloppy joe that tasted homemade and one that tasted burned. Number 21, chicken gizzards, cleaned, boiled tender, in salted water first, then drained, dredged in seasoned flour, and fried in the electric skillet until the coating cracked between your teeth. Gizzards divided every household. Half the table loved them. The other half would not touch them with a fork. But the person buying the groceries knew something the children at the table did not. Gizzards cost almost nothing per pound, and a small container made enough fried pieces to fill a serving bowl. Dipped in hot sauce, eaten with white bread, and a pile of fries or slaw, gizzards were the Friday night alternative when fish was too expensive that week. The people who grew up eating them never stopped craving them. The people who refused them never changed their minds either. Number 20, fried sweet potatoes. Sweet potatoes peeled and sliced into thin rounds, then laid into the electric skillet with butter and a sprinkle of sugar. The slices fried slow on medium heat until the edges caramelized and the centers went soft enough to break apart with a fork. Some mothers dusted them with cinnamon, a few added a splash of vanilla. Fried sweet potatoes were not a side dish on busy nights. They were the whole dinner alongside a piece of cornbread or a glass of buttermilk. Sweet potatoes stored for weeks in a cool cabinet, and a single potato made enough rounds to fill a plate. The sugar and butter in the skillet turned into a glaze that coated every slice, and the kitchen smelled like autumn regardless of what month it was. Number 19, smothered pork steaks. Pork steaks were the cut that the butcher sold for next to nothing because most people walked right past them toward the chops and the ribs. They were tough, fatty, and needed time. A black mother with an electric skillet in 30 minutes turned them into something the whole table fought over. Seasoned with salt, pepper, garlic powder, and onion powder, then browned hard on both sides in the skillet until a dark crust formed. Sliced onions laid across the top, a pour of water or broth, a spoonful of flour stirred into the drippings, and the lid went on. The skillet dropped to 275, and the pork sat there while the fat rendered and the gravy thickened around it. By the time the lid came off, the meat pulled apart with the fork, and the onions had dissolved into something closer to jam than vegetable. Served over white rice with the gravy spoon heavy across everything, smothered pork steaks were the dinner that tasted like Sunday but happened on a Wednesday. The cut was too cheap for the butcher to bother trimming. The woman buying it never asked him to. She knew that the fat was the flavor, and the skillet was patient enough to prove it. In St. Louis, pork steaks were practically a regional staple. In the rest of the South, they went by different names but landed on the same plates. Wherever a mother needed to stretch a few dollars into a meal that made people sit down and stay quiet, smothered pork steaks answered the call. The leftovers went into a container in the refrigerator and came back the next day even better because the gravy set overnight and the meat soaked up every last drop of onion and garlic. Nobody reheated it in the microwave. It went right back into the electric skillet on low heat until the gravy loosened again and the kitchen filled with the same smell it had the night before. Number 18, cube steak smothered in gravy. Cube steak was already tenderized at the butcher counter, which meant it went from package to plate in 15 minutes. Seasoned, dredged in flour, browned fast on high heat, then covered in onion gravy and left to simmer under the lid. The gravy did the rest of the work. Some mothers added a can of cream of mushroom soup to the gravy and called it done. Others made it from scratch with flour and drippings. Either way, the result was tender beef in thick gravy served over rice or egg noodles. Cube steak was what the budget allowed when real steak was out of reach, and smothering it made the difference invisible. Number 17, Fried spam, a can of spam, sliced into thick rectangles and fried in the skillet until the edges turn brown and slightly crispy. Served with eggs and toast for dinner, or between two slices of bread with mustard. Spam was not glamorous. It sat on the shelf next to the canned vegetables and the instant grits, and nobody bragged about buying it. But a single can fed 2 or 3 people. It never spoiled, and it fried up in minutes. On nights when the refrigerator held nothing fresh, spam was the answer that did not require a trip to the store. The can opened with a key that peeled back the lid in a single strip. The meat slid out in one solid block. 2 minutes per side in the hot skillet, and dinner was done before the table was set. Number 16, sausage with peppers and onions. Smoked sausage sliced into thick coins and browned in the electric skillet. Green bell pepper strips and sliced onion added once the sausage had color. The vegetables softened in the rendered fat and picked up every bit of seasoning the sausage left behind. Some households ate it over rice. Others stuffed it into bread. A few poured a can of tomato sauce over the top and let it simmer for another 10 minutes. The whole meal came out of one skillet in under half an hour, and the leftovers reheated the next day without losing anything. Smoked sausage was sturdy. It never went bad fast. It stretched across a full plate of rice, and it tasted like somebody spent an hour in the kitchen, even when the actual cook time was 20 minutes. Number 15, fried okra. Fresh okra sliced into rounds, tossed in cornmeal with salt and pepper, and fried in the electric skillet until each piece turned golden and crunchy on the outside. The cornmeal coating sealed in the moisture, so the okra stayed tender inside without the slippery texture that made some people refuse it altogether. Fried okra was a garden to skillet meal in the summertime. Okra grew fast in southern heat, and a single plant produced enough pods to fill a brown paper bag every few days. On nights when the garden was giving more than the family could eat fresh, fried okra with a side of sliced tomatoes and cornbread was the entire supper. The electric skillet browned it evenly without the mess of a deep pot of oil, and children who claimed they hated okra ate it fried without a single complaint. The trick was the cornmeal. It gave every piece a shell that crunched first and let the tender center follow, and by the time a child realized what was underneath the coating, the plate was already half gone. Number 14, stewed beef, braised in the electric skillet, the cheapest beef at the grocery store, cut into rough cubes, dusted in flour, and browned in batches in the skillet until each piece had a dark sear on at least 2 sides. Then came the onion, the garlic, a few carrots cut into coins, potatoes quartered, and enough water to cover everything halfway. Lid on. Heat turned down low, and for the next hour, the skillet did what no quick meal could do. It turned something tough and cheap into something that fell apart on the fork. Stewed beef was not the kind of dinner a mother chose when she had options. It was the dinner she chose when the roast was too expensive, the ground beef was already gone, and the only thing left at the meat counter was the pre-cut stew meat in a foam tray marked down because nobody else wanted it. What separated this from a pot roast was the tool. The electric skillet held a low, even simmer that a stovetop burner could not match without babysitting. A mother could brown the meat, add the vegetables, set the dial, and walk away to handle homework, phone calls, or laundry. When she came back, the kitchen smelled like a meal that took all day but only asked for 10 minutes of her hands. The broth thickened on its own from the flour on the meat. The potatoes broke down at the edges and made the liquid richer. Spooned over rice or soaked up with a piece of bread, skillet stewed beef was the meal that nobody at the table knew was the last resort. It tasted like the first choice. The carrots had gone sweet, the potatoes had gone soft at the edges, and the beef had given up every ounce of resistance it started with. A woman who bought the cheapest tray at the counter and turned it into, this had done something no restaurant menu could price correctly. Number 13, skillet red beans and rice. Canned red beans drained and poured into the electric skillet with sliced smoked sausage, diced onion, a bay leaf, garlic powder, and a splash of water. Simmered together with the lid on while the rice, cooked separately or in some households, stirred right into the same skillet. The beans softened and thickened into a creamy sauce that coated the sausage and clung to the rice. Monday night red beans and rice was a tradition carried from New Orleans kitchens up through the Great Migration. The women who landed in Chicago, Detroit, and Philadelphia brought the recipe with them and adapted it to whatever equipment they had. The electric skillet was the adaptation that stuck. Number 12, ground beef and rice. Brown a pound of ground beef in the skillet. Drain some of the fat. Add a diced onion, salt, pepper, garlic powder, and a cup of uncooked rice. Pour in 2 cups of water, put the lid on, and let the skillet do the rest. In 20 minutes, the rice absorbed the liquid and the beef flavor at the same time. 1 skillet, 1 meal. No side dishes needed. Some mothers stirred in a can of tomatoes. Others added a handful of frozen peas or corn. The base never changed. This was the dinner that appeared when the pantry looked empty, but still had ground beef in the freezer and rice in the cabinet. Number 11, hot water cornbread. Cornmeal, boiling water, a pinch of salt, and a spoonful of sugar if the house liked it sweet. The boiling water cooked the cornmeal just enough to hold together when shaped by hand into small oval patties. Dropped into the hot skillet with oil, they fried until the outside was crisp and dark gold and the inside stayed dense and warm. Hot water cornbread was the bread of kitchens where the oven took too long to heat or did not work at all. It took 5 minutes from bowl to plate, eaten with greens, beans, fried fish, or by itself with butter. It filled the same place at the table that a pan of cornbread would have, but without the weight or the baking dish. The electric skillet fried them evenly on both sides, and a mother could turn out a dozen patties in the time it took to set the table. Number 10, neck bones braised in the skillet. Pork neck bones browned hard in the electric skillet, then covered with water, onion, garlic, salt, and pepper, and left to simmer low with the lid on for about an hour. The meat fell off the bone and the liquid turned into a rich dark broth. Neck bones were throwaway cuts. The butcher practically gave them away. A black mother who could turn neck bones and a pot of rice into a dinner that had the whole table quiet while they ate was working with a kind of knowledge that cannot be learned from a recipe. The meat was small. The flavor was enormous. The bones went clean. Number 9, hot dogs split and fried. Hot dogs sliced lengthwise, sometimes scored across the back and pressed flat into the hot skillet until they curled and blackened at the edges. Served on white bread with mustard or ketchup. Sometimes paired with canned baked beans, heated right in the same skillet after the hot dogs came out. This was the 5-minute dinner, the dinner that happened on the night when everything else had gone wrong and there was no time, no energy, and no patience for anything that required more than one step. Nobody was proud of it in the moment, but every child who ate fried hot dogs on a busy weeknight remembers them now with the kind of warmth that only distance can give. Number 8, skillet potatoes and onions. Peeled potatoes sliced thin, a diced onion, salt, pepper, and a few tablespoons of oil in the electric skillet. The lid stayed on while the potatoes softened and came off once they started to brown. Stirred every few minutes so the bottom layer crisped while the rest stayed tender. Some mothers added sliced bell pepper or a sprinkle of paprika. Others let the potatoes speak for themselves. Served with a piece of cornbread or a fried egg on top, skillet potatoes were a complete meal made from ingredients that cost almost nothing and sat in the kitchen for weeks without going bad. A 10-pound bag of potatoes and a few onions could stretch across 3 or 4 dinners, and the electric skillet turned them out crispy without needing a deep fryer or a cast iron pan that weighed more than the food inside it. Number 7, turkey wings braised in the electric skillet. Turkey wings were oversized, bony, and took up more room in the skillet than any other cut of poultry. That was part of the point. A single wing split at the joint filled half the pan and fed 2 people, seasoned with salt, pepper, garlic powder, onion powder, and smoked paprika, browned on both sides in a thin layer of oil, then covered in a mixture of chicken broth and sliced onion, lid on, 275 degrees for close to an hour. The meat pulled from the bone in long, dark strands. The skin, which had crisped during the browning, softened under the lid and melted into the braising liquid. The broth turned into gravy without any flour. A pot of rice or a pan of cornbread caught the drippings, and the plate looked like Thanksgiving on a random Tuesday. Turkey wings were cheap because most shoppers thought of turkey as a whole bird, once a year purchase. The wings sat in the freezer section in plastic bags, priced by the pound at a fraction of what chicken breasts cost. A mother who bought them knew she was getting flavor that chicken could not match. Deeper, smokier, richer. The meat was darker and denser and held seasoning the way lighter poultry never could. Braising them low in the electric skillet meant the connective tissue broke down slowly. By the time the lid came off, the wings were so tender that the bones slid out clean and the meat collapsed under a fork. Children who had never eaten turkey outside of November did not know what they were eating. They just knew it was good, and there was enough of it, and the gravy on the rice made everything on the plate disappear faster than it was served. No advertisement ever told this part of the story. The electric skillet was never marketed to the women who got the most use out of it. It showed up in department store catalogs next to fondue sets and electric can openers, aimed at suburban kitchens that already had a full stove and an oven that worked, but in apartments with one working burner, in houses where the gas bill was past due, in project kitchens where the oven had not heated evenly in years, the electric skillet became the entire cooking surface, one outlet and a flat countertop. Black mothers turned a cheap appliance into a full kitchen, and they did it so quietly that no cookbook or cooking show ever gave them credit for it. The recipes that came out of those skillets were not accidents, they were engineering. Number 6, chipped beef on toast, dried beef from a jar, torn into shreds and fried in butter in the skillet, a few spoonfuls of flour stirred in, then milk poured slowly while everything thickened into a salty, peppery cream sauce, spooned over toast or biscuits. The military called it by a name that could not be repeated at the dinner table. Families just called it cream beef. It showed up on nights when the pantry was truly bare. A jar of dried beef, some butter, flour, and milk made a hot dinner for 3 or 4 people. The taste was salty and rich and completely filling. It was never beautiful. It fed who it needed to feed. Number 5, Vienna sausages fried in the skillet. The can peeled open with a pull tab, and the small, pale sausages slid out in a cluster. Laid into the hot skillet, they browned on 2 sides, and the casing tightened until it split at the edges. Served on white bread with mustard, or eaten straight off the plate with crackers and a glass of Kool-Aid. Nobody put Vienna sausages on a menu. Nobody photographed them for a cookbook. But a can cost less than $1. It sat in the pantry for months, and it turned into a hot meal in under 3 minutes. On the nights when the grocery money was spent, the gas tank was empty, and the only option was whatever the cabinet still held. Vienna sausages, fried golden in the electric skillet, were the dinner that showed up without being asked. Some mothers sliced them lengthwise first so the flat side browned harder. Others left them whole and let the casing do the work. Either way, the plate was empty in 10 minutes, and nobody talked about what they ate. They just ate. Number 4, skillet macaroni with ground beef and tomatoes. Brown the ground beef, drain the fat, add a diced onion and a can of diced tomatoes, then pour in dry elbow macaroni and enough water for the pasta to cook right in the skillet. Lid on, 20 minutes. The pasta absorbed the tomato and beef liquid and came out soft, thick, and coated in a sauce that built itself. Some mothers added a slice of American cheese on top at the end and let it melt under the lid. This was the original one-pot pasta made in kitchens across the South and the Great Migration cities long before any cooking magazine put a name on it. Number 3, cornmeal-crusted catfish fillets. Catfish dipped in buttermilk, dragged through seasoned cornmeal, and fried in the electric skillet in about an inch of oil. The cornmeal turned into a crust so crisp it cracked when you pressed a fork into it. Catfish was affordable and abundant in southern states where ponds and rivers ran through farmland. Even in northern cities after the Great Migration, catfish stayed accessible in grocery stores that served black neighborhoods. A plate of fried catfish, a pile of coleslaw, and a piece of white bread was a dinner that crossed state lines without ever losing its identity. The electric skillet kept the oil at an even temperature, which meant the cornmeal crust came out the same every time. No guessing, no burning, just a steady golden fry that smelled like the river and the kitchen at the same time. Number 2, fried green tomatoes. Unripe tomatoes sliced thick, dipped in buttermilk, coated in a mix of cornmeal and flour with salt and pepper, and fried in the electric skillet until the coating turned a deep gold and the tomato inside went soft and tangy. The acidity of the green tomato cut through the richness of the cornmeal crust, and each slice held its shape on the plate like a small, crisp disc. Fried green tomatoes came from the garden, not the grocery store. When the first frost threatened and the vines were still loaded with tomatoes that had not ripened, a mother picked them all and fried them before they went to waste. It was thrift dressed up as cooking. Served alongside pinto beans or black-eyed peas, fried green tomatoes were the side dish that turned a sparse table into a full one without adding a single item to the grocery list. Number 1, the clean out the fridge skillet dinner. This is not one recipe. This is every recipe. Whatever was left in the refrigerator on a last night before grocery day went into the electric skillet together. A leftover pork chop chopped into pieces, half an onion, a few slices of Spam, yesterday's rice, the last 2 eggs, a handful of frozen vegetables, seasoned with whatever was close, stirred together over medium heat until everything was hot and the flavors had no choice but to work with each other. There was no name for it, there was no recipe, there was only a woman looking at what she had, deciding it was enough, and making it into something her children would eat without complaint. This was the meal that proved the electric skillet was never about a specific dish. It was about the refusal to let an empty kitchen mean an empty table. Every clean out dinner was different. Every single one was the same decision. Number 21, Crowder peas with smoked meat. Crowder peas were the field pea that stained the Potlikker brown, darker and earthier than black-eyed peas with a dense, starchy bite that held up to hours of cooking. They went into a pot with a smoked ham bone or a chunk of smoked sausage, a whole onion, and enough water to cover by 2 inches. The pot sat on the back of the stove all morning, the peas swelling and softening while the smoke from the meat worked its way into every bean. By the time the family sat down, the liquor at the bottom of the pot was thick enough to be a meal on its own, poured over cornbread in a glass. Crowder peas were a backyard crop, dried on the vine and shelled on the porch in late summer. The seeds passed between families like currency. When the last generation of home gardeners thinned out, the peas became hard to find, and the Sunday pot went with them. Hamburger steak and onion gravy stretched cheap meat into something that smelled like a Sunday kitchen on a Wednesday night. The beef was seasoned with salt, pepper, and garlic powder, shaped into a thick oval patty, and pan-fried in cast iron until browned on both sides. The patty came out, sliced onions went into the same grease, cooking down until soft and golden. A spoonful of flour stirred into the fat, then water or broth added slowly while scraping the bottom. That's where the flavor lived, in the fond, in the bits that stuck. The gravy thickened, dark and rich. The patty went back in to simmer until tender and served over white rice. It was a complete meal for under $1. Seniors who cooked this alone often made enough gravy to save, poured over toast the next morning. It became breakfast too. The women who perfected this gravy never measured the flour. They watched the color and knew. Number 19, smothered pork chops, bone-in pork chops, thick cut and seasoned with salt, black pepper, garlic powder, and onion powder, were dredged through seasoned flour and browned in a cast iron skillet until the coating turned golden on both sides. The chops came out and a full onion, sliced thin, went into the same pan with the drippings. The onions cooked down until they softened and started to color. Then a few spoonfuls of flour went in to make a roux right there in the pan. Water or broth loosened everything into a gravy, and the chops went back in, nestled into the sauce with the onions draped over the top. The lid went on, and the heat dropped to the lowest flame the stove could hold. For the next 2 hours, that skillet sat untouched. The gravy thickened around the meat, the flour coating on the chops dissolved into the sauce, and the onions broke down until they were no longer slices, but part of the liquid itself. The pork turned so tender that the bone pulled clean with no resistance. The gravy left behind was not something poured from a jar. It built itself from the meat, the flour, the onion, and the long patience of a covered pan. Smothered pork chops were the Sunday dinner that required no occasion and no announcement. The cook picked up a package of chops on Saturday, and by noon on Sunday, the house smelled like onion gravy and black pepper, and everyone knew what was coming. It was dependable food, made the same way every time, and it carried the weight of a real meal without the cost of a roast. The dish lost its hold when boneless chops replaced bone-in cuts, and oven-baked recipes replaced the slow skillet. A smothered chop cannot be made fast. The whole point was the waiting, and the waiting is what disappeared. A tin key, a slow peel of metal, and the sharp smell of oil and salt, sardines and crackers with hot sauce needed no stove and no explanation. In black households across the South, a can of sardines was a full meal eaten standing at the counter or sitting by the window with a sleeve of saltines and a bottle of Louisiana or Crystal. They came packed in mustard sauce, tomato sauce, or plain oil, and every person had their preference, argued about with the same conviction as church denominations. You ate them one at a time, laid across a cracker, dotted with hot sauce, followed by a sip of something cold. During the 1950s and 60s, a tin cost 10 or 15 cents, making it one of the cheapest proteins on the shelf. For elderly folks living alone, sardines were dinner on nights when cooking felt like too much and the body just needed fuel. No pan to wash, no grease to cool, just a tin, a knife, and the quiet rhythm of feeding yourself when nobody else was coming to the table. If you didn't cut slits in the bologna before it hit the skillet, you weren't from the right kitchen. Number 22, neck bones and rice. Pork neck bones were cheap, bony, and full of marrow. Browned in a skillet with salt, pepper, and garlic powder, they went into a heavy pot with sliced onions and enough water to cover. 3 hours of simmering extracted every ounce of flavor from the bones and turned the surrounding meat fork tender. The broth that formed was ladled over a mound of white rice, so the grains swelled and softened into a thick, savory porridge. Every plate required a pile of napkins and the patience to pick around small bones. Neck bones were the kind of cut that a black grandmother could buy with pocket change and turn into a meal that fed everyone at the table twice. When pre-cut boneless pork took over the meat counter and a new generation stopped wanting to eat around cartilage, the dish quietly left the Sunday rotation. Vienna sausages, straight from the tin, were the dinner that happened when dinner didn't happen. When the legs were tired, the stove felt too far, and the body just needed something before bed. The small can popped open with a pull tab, and the pale little sausages sat in their broth like something between a meal and an apology. Eaten cold with saltines and a squirt of yellow mustard, or picked up with fingers one at a time, this was a dinner measured in silence. It cost 35 cents in the 1970s. It required nothing, no cooking, no plates if you didn't want one, no effort beyond pulling the tab. For seniors living alone in small apartments after their families moved away, this was Tuesday night and Wednesday and sometimes Friday. Nobody judged it out loud because everyone had a can in the cabinet. The people who ate Vienna sausages for dinner weren't ashamed. They were tired, and tired is its own kind of hungry. Number 20, pigtails and brown gravy. Pigtails were the cheapest pork cut the butcher had, often given away or sold by the pound for almost nothing. Chopped into short sections and browned hard in a skillet, they went into a pot with onions, garlic, soy sauce, and brown sugar. 3 hours of slow simmering turned the cartilage gelatinous and the meat tender, swimming in a thick, dark, slightly sweet gravy. The texture was unlike any other pork dish on the table, sticky, rich, and deeply savory. Pigtails were common in black kitchens from Louisiana through the Carolinas, especially in families with Caribbean roots who brought the technique from the islands. The dish crossed borders the same way the families did. By the 1990s, the cut had vanished from most meat counters, and a generation grew up never knowing it existed. Fried bologna with white bread was a 10-cent dinner that showed up on tables across every black neighborhood in the 1960s and 70s, not because anyone planned it, but because the refrigerator was low and the energy was lower. A thick slice of Oscar Mayer or store-brand bologna went into a dry skillet over medium heat. Without those slits, two cuts like a cross, the meat would dome up in the center and burn at the edges. Done right, the bologna curled slightly, browned in spots, and developed a salty crust that no fancy charcuterie could match. Laid on soft white bread with yellow mustard or a smear of mayonnaise, it was dinner in 4 minutes. Some added a slice of American cheese, others put hot sauce on the bread first, and the old folks who ate it alone at night, they didn't need sides. Just a sandwich, a glass of sweet tea, and the television on low. Number 23, oxtail stew over rice. Oxtail sections were dusted with seasoned flour and browned in batches in a cast iron Dutch oven until every surface had a dark crust. Onions, garlic, thyme, and a splash of tomato paste went in next, then enough water to barely cover the bones. The lid went on and the pot moved to a low oven or the back of the stove for 4 hours. By the time the lid came off, the collagen had dissolved into the liquid, turning the broth into something that coated the spoon like varnish. The meat clung to the knobbed vertebrae in small, intensely flavored pockets that had to be worked loose with teeth and fingers. Oxtail was a Sunday staple in black households from Jamaica to Georgia, carried across the water and adapted to whatever stove was available. The dish required nothing expensive, just time and a willingness to cook something that looked unpromising into something extraordinary. When butcher counters shrank and oxtail jumped in price from pennies a pound to one of the most expensive cuts in the case, the Sunday pot became a luxury that priced out the families who invented it. When the grocery money ran out 3 days before the check came, eggs and rice with tomato gravy kept the lights on inside the body. This was Depression-era arithmetic carried through generations of black kitchens. A dozen eggs for 30 cents in the 1940s, a cup of rice from a bulk sack, and a can of tomatoes that stretched across 2 meals. Rice cooked plain, eggs scrambled soft in a skillet with butter or bacon grease, pulled off the heat while still wet so they wouldn't turn rubbery. The tomato gravy came together in the same pan. Canned tomatoes crushed by hand, a little sugar to cut the acid, salt, and a spoonful of flour to thicken it. Everything went into one bowl. Eggs on rice, gravy over both. And for a few minutes, the kitchen smelled like someone was taking care of you, even if that someone was yourself. The old ones could tell by the color of the gravy whether it had been made with love or just made to get through. Nobody talked about this one at the family reunion, but everyone knew. Number 17, short ribs in brown gravy. The short rib was a working class cut, bone in, fatty, and tough until you gave it time. Short ribs were dredged in seasoned flour, browned in a hot skillet, then transferred to a deep pot with onions, garlic, and just enough water to make a gravy. The lid went on and the heat stayed low for 3 hours. By the time they came off the stove, the meat had pulled away from the bone and the gravy had turned thick and dark. This was not barbecue. This was stovetop braising with no recipe and no timer. The cook checked by feel, and when the bone wiggled loose, dinner was ready. Served over white rice or egg noodles with the gravy poured heavy. This meal survived on its simplicity. That same simplicity is what made it easy to forget once the faster options arrived. Grits with butter was breakfast, lunch, or dinner, depending on what you served alongside. Proof that the simplest dishes often provided the deepest comfort. Stone ground or regular grits were cooked slowly with water or milk, stirred frequently to prevent lumps until they reached a creamy consistency that held its shape on a spoon. A generous pat of butter stirred in at the end added richness that transformed humble corn into something almost luxurious. For seniors on fixed incomes, grits cost pennies per serving and satisfied hunger for hours. They could be dressed up with cheese, topped with eggs, or served alongside fish, sausage, or vegetables. The dish required patience but little active work, and the reward was a bowl full of warmth that connected you to generations of Southern tables where grits was simply a part of life. The butter hit the hot iron first, then the corn, and the sizzle told you everything about how the next 5 minutes would go. Number 24, stewed ox tongue. The tongue came from the butcher wrapped in brown paper, heavy and muscular, and it went straight into a pot of boiling water with onion, bay leaves, and black peppercorns. 3 hours later, the outer skin peeled off in one sheet, revealing pale, tender meat underneath. Sliced thick and laid into a gravy of tomatoes, garlic, and thyme, the tongue simmered for another hour until the slices could be cut with a fork. The texture was unlike any other beef on the table, dense, smooth, almost creamy. In black kitchens across the rural South, tongue was a Sunday dish that required no apology and no explanation. The older women served it with pride. The children ate it without knowing what it was until they were old enough to ask. When supermarkets replaced butcher counters and customers stopped requesting whole organs, the tongue disappeared from the case and from the table at the same time. Tomato sandwiches with mayonnaise only appeared when the garden came in. That short window in July and August when the tomatoes were heavy, warm from the vine, and red all the way through. This was never a winter meal. The tomato had to be sliced thick, almost a quarter inch, laid on soft white bread, spread with Duke's mayonnaise, always Duke's in the South, where brand loyalty ran deeper than politics. Salt and black pepper on top, nothing else. The bread soaked through from the juice within seconds, and you ate it fast, leaning over the plate so it didn't drip down your wrist. For seniors who still kept a small garden or had a neighbor who brought tomatoes by, this sandwich was the taste of summer itself. No cooking, no heat from the stove, and a sweetness from the fruit that made the meal feel like a gift. Once the season passed, it was gone, and waiting for it to come back was part of what made it matter. A half pound of ground beef could become a full dinner if you knew what to do with the grease left behind. Number 18, baked chicken quarters with onion gravy. Leg and thigh quarters, the cheapest chicken at the store, seasoned and laid in a baking dish with thick slices of onion underneath. A cup of broth went in, aluminum foil sealed the top, and the dish baked for 2.5 hours at low heat. The chicken steamed in its own juices until the meat fell off the bone and the onions melted into a sweet, savory gravy at the bottom of the pan. This was a Sunday dinner that appeared when there was not enough money for a whole bird. 1/4 per person, gravy over rice, greens on the side. Simple enough that a teenager could handle it alone. Slow enough that nobody rushed the oven or the afternoon. Salmon croquettes from a can were one of the most common quick meals in African American kitchens from the 1940s onward, when canned pink salmon cost less than $1 and sat in the pantry for months. The salmon was drained, bones removed by feel, then mixed with crushed saltine crackers, a beaten egg, diced onion, and black pepper, shaped into flat patties and fried in cast iron with just enough oil to cover the bottom. They crisped up golden in minutes. The outside crackled when you bit through, giving way to a soft, flaky center that tasted like the sea and the South at once. For seniors eating alone, 2 croquettes on a plate with a slice of white bread was a full dinner. Every grandmother had her own ratio of cracker to salmon, and she never wrote it down. You learned it by standing beside her, watching her hands. When she was gone, the patties never came out quite the same. 25 dinners came out of one appliance, and a generation of women who cooked without timers, without thermometers, and without anyone watching. If your mother or your grandmother made any of these meals, you already know what the electric skillet sounded like when it hit the right temperature. You know the click of the dial and the smell of oil heating up. Pick one of these dinners. Make it this week. Not because the recipe is hard to find, but because the memory is worth keeping alive. Drop the one your mother made the most in the comments. And if she made the clean out the fridge dinner, tell us what she put in it. Every answer is going to be different, and every single one is going to be right.